Did you realize that our entire faith story begins and ends with water? Our scriptures begin with the Spirit of God hovering over the darkness, a deep, inky, watery abyss. And we all know that when water is left to its own devices, it only wreaks havoc and creates chaos. Anybody who has ever had a busted pipe knows that to be true. So God rained in that water and lit it up with the sun up in the sky, and there were clouds and there were oceans and there were rivers and lakes and babbling brooks. God dealt with and reigned in the water before creating any living being, before humans, before animals, even before plants, because God knew that every living being on earth would need water to be able to sustain life. And when that good creation turned away from God, the water turned away from them or turned on them. It was water that dealt a death blow to almost the entirety of creation in the Great Flood. But even with all of that devastation, water was still something that no one could live without. It was water that carried Moses, Israel's tiny little future liberator, to safety. It was water being parted that led the children of Israel to freedom, and that same water came crashing down and kept those who were pursuing them from giving chase. And when God's children were wandering around in the desert and getting tired and cranky and complaining, God brought water forth from a rock. From a rock. The Bible tells us that the Lord sits enthroned over the flood and reigns over all the deep waters. Water comes to us in tears shed by the waters of Babylon when the people in exile there lay down and wept. Water gives us healing, even the muddy waters of the river Jordan, where reluctant General Naaman found healing from his leprosy. Even when the storms rage and the waters surge and the Leviathan roars, the psalmist assures us that calm waters are in our future. And the Lord, who is our shepherd, will lead us beside those still waters. Water is friend, water is foe. It is life-giving, it is life-taking, and we are actually made up of water. Water is what makes us. Depending on your age and gender, your body right now is somewhere between 60 to 80% water. No wonder it is so important to hydrate. And not only are we made of water, we are a lot like water. Remember, water left to its own devices will only wreak havoc and create chaos. People left to our own devices will only wreak havoc and create chaos. So the God of water had to come down into this wet and wild earth and become one of these water-based people. And what is the first thing that Jesus did? What is the first thing that kicks off Jesus's ministry? He is baptized in water. Jesus calls himself living water. And the first people he calls to follow him are fishermen who make their living from the water. There is water everywhere. Jesus meets women at wells and blind men by pools, and he cooks breakfast at the beach for his beloved disciples. But Jesus does not have the same relationship with water that we mere mortals do. No, Jesus turns water into wine. Jesus walks on water. Jesus takes the storms and calms them simply by saying, "Be still." And some of Jesus' last words on the cross were, "I thirst." We all need water. We all must have water. Living water is not merely a metaphor. It is a spiritual truth and a physical necessity. Living water indeed. And what was the last thing Jesus tells us to do before he goes up to live with his Father in heaven? Go and baptize in water. Use baptism, use water to mediate my grace. Use baptism, use water to show people they belong. Go and use the living water to tell my people who they are and whose they are. Use the water. And just like we are like water, so is God. God is very much like water, but in very different ways than we are. I mean, who knows the shape of water? No one. No one can tell you what the shape of water is, just as no one can tell you what the shape of God is. And just as water takes many forms in our lives, so does God. God shows up in many forms, in many ways in our lives, sometimes in ways that we never expect or predicted. We are made of water. Water is in us, and water surrounds us, and water gives us life. God is in us and surrounds us and gives us life. Water and God, life-giving, essential. So in the week ahead, as you encounter water, whether it is brushing your teeth or washing your face or staying hydrated or stepping out into the rain, remember water and God, life-giving and essential to living the life we are called to. Let your encounters with water remind you of just who you are and who God is. And be looking for more on God and water this week, throughout the week, in our Doubting Believer community. Blessings on the week ahead, y'all.